Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are watching from, whatever time of day it is. Really great to be here. This is the Meet the Makers session. It's UK House, South by Southwest. I hope everybody's been engaging in the various sessions that have been being run and showcasing what fantastic creativity we've got in the UK. And I think what's been most interesting about most of the sessions are the different ways in which creative businesses in the UK are grappling and working with technology. And what's really interesting, I think, is that most of that was taking place long before COVID-19. And what was fantastic both about last year and this year is the extent to which businesses and creative practitioners have been able to adapt and innovate and respond to the impact of COVID. And the fact that they were able to do so was because of the extent to which most companies were already engaging with technology and starting to adapt and innovate in the ways in which they're working. And I'm pleased to say that UK Research and Innovation, which is where I work, through the Audience the Future programme and the Creative Industries Clusters programme, those two programmes were already set up. And a lot of the projects that we're going to see today were all supported in some way or another by those UKRI programmes. So just a quick reminder of what we're going to be doing over the next hour. So we're going to be hearing from four companies that have been developing new production tools around augmented reality, virtual reality and mixed reality. And as I say, in most cases, these were all products and services or experiences and tools that were being developed before this time last year. And what in a sort of ironic sense, that what the last year has enabled everybody to do, of course, is to apply those and to test those innovations in new ways. So what we're going to do, we've got four presentations. We've got Cutting Room, which is an authoring production tool that's been developed by the Digital Creativity Labs in York. I've Got a Feeling, developed by a project or a program, a consortium called Happy, the Happy Consortium, which is mainly London-based, but actually they've got a network throughout the UK. We've got a presentation on Onar, which is a fantastic animation studio that's based in Northern Ireland. And then Plan V, which is the final presentation, which will be looking at a VR production tool based out of Cardiff in South Wales. So a real UK spread and a fantastic showcase. So I'm going to start by inviting Marion onto the stage. Now I'm hoping that I'll get an invitation to join me on stage here from Marion. And here is Marion, I think.
Oh, love, yes.
So Marion, great to see you here. I've barely introduced you, so I'm going to hand straight over to you and ask you to introduce yourself, and I'm going to step aside for you to tell us about your project. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Graham. It's really a pleasure to be here and present one aspect of our research. And I'm going to put a presentation on screen. Oh, I beg your pardon. I have to share my screen first. So please bear with me whilst I do the mechanics. We're going to see an infinite loop now, but very briefly, there we are in the presentation. I hope you can all see that. I am Marian Rusu. I am the Director of Digital Creativity Labs. This is an impact-driven research center led from the University of York, but involving other universities from UK, with a partner base of over 100 companies in the creative industry space. And I'm going to talk to you about Cutting Room, a toolkit for making interactive film. Take Bandersnatch as a reference. The distribution of Bandersnatch and the making of Bandersnatch by Netflix reignited the public's interest in this form. And it is a really high quality production, very well acted. The reviews were somewhat mixed, but that is very good for the genre. But the point that I try to make through Bandersnatch is that in interaction, in behavior, it is still in the space of yes, no questions which drive the narration forward. Also, this is the term that we use for this type of model for an interactive narrative, is that of a branching narrative. And a branching narrative is represented or modeled in abstract terms visually, like this, for example, and such structures quickly become monsters and very, very hard to tame by creators, by creative minds. To give you a reference, if we have a 30-minute movie with 3-minute long clips, made of 3-minute long clips, and 3 minutes is kind of a long enough period for providing interaction, and if we have 3 options from each of progressing the story, we end up on the last layer of the structure with 20 million clips, and even more threatening, with 100,000 connections that have to be defined between them. And this thing actually spreads like a virus, because if we add only 3 more minutes to this 30-minute clip, we have 300,000 connections. If you add another 3 minutes, it'll be 1 million, and so on and so forth. So what happens actually in this space is that authors find structures that don't explode and only use them. Now, of course, I beg your pardon, I forgot about this slide. Here's an example of people re-engineering Bandersnatch, and that's how the structure of Bandersnatch is represented. And these structures have a huge drawback in that they constrain creative expression. So the behavior then of the movie, in terms of the interaction that it allows, is rather simplistic and insufficiently versatile. So what I'm suggesting is that we try to drop the branching narrative label, which carries this history with it, and instead we use non-linear narratives to suggest an increased structural complexity, which in turn provides more versatility and more flexibility in storytelling. It fosters creativity in this genre better. The University of York, the Digital Creativity Labs, together with BBC, are working on a conceptual model called object-based media. Object-based media suggests that interactive narratives are made of objects, more or less the same as in filmmaking, video and audio clips, pictures, graphical elements, text, whatever you have in post-production, in editing to assemble the movie. However, the difference is that objects are automatically edited by a software, by a machine, at the time of viewing. And objects are composited in layers. So an example of a potential simplistic interaction would be the addition or removal of subtitles dynamically, or of an audio effect, or so on and so forth. And also objects are automatically sequenced in time. And an example of an interaction, again, very in simple terms, would be, for instance, to not show an 18 rated scene during daytime in a movie. In Cutting Room, we provide a number of features that we claim, and I think we're right in claiming, help authoring of interactive storytelling, interactive stories immensely. Interactive objects are elements of content in their own right, that they provide a cue to the viewer. They have a name which they're referred, and more importantly, they are bound to a value which is achieved through users' interaction, through viewer interaction of viewing time. We separate content from structures, and we provide some aggregation structures, 3 basic aggregation structures that are very powerful and allow story worlds, story spaces to be structured in a way that is accessible to the human mind and don't explode like branching narratives. And they are a forking decision point, which is more or less what you have in branching narratives. But in addition, we have a conditional selection group, which finds from a bin of objects the best fit element to a particular narrative context, and a conditional layer that allows element of context to be synchronized dynamically at viewing time. And the most important thing that I have to stress here is that these elements, these structures can be combined and recombined on almost an infinite layer of possibilities. So we move from a two-dimensional representation of the story space to a three-dimensional space. And cutting room, just to give you, I would have loved to give you some a demo, but unfortunately 10 minutes is not enough to make the point with the tool. Cutting room is implemented in Unity. You don't need to know Unity at all. You're provided with an authoring environment, a standalone authoring environment. However, if you know Unity, then you can extend the set of functionalities that a cutting room provides. And you have more or less the same tools that you'd expect in an editing environment, authoring tools, a narrative canvas where you build the structures. And I know you see here on screen a branching narrative. We do more than that, and that's going to be showed on the next slides. You have the object store, you have a preview window, and a property inspector. And here's a cutting room at work a bit. On the narrative canvas, we selected a particular object. That object could be viewed in the preview window and trimmed. Other post-production effects such as color correction and filters and what have you would have to be done outside cutting room, but trimming is an important feature that we need to have within this environment. And then in the property window, you can define connections to other objects, metadata tags, position on screen, and other properties. And I want to exemplify here very simplistically how a structure, a selection group, is then visualized on another narrative canvas. And here on the left, you see a narrative, a selection group depicted in blue, and its content is then defined on another narrative canvas. In this instance, only 3 clips. But this structure could be recursive. Here's how a layer is defined. Yet again, in a similar fashion, we have now 3 narrative canvases, 1 for the top layer narrative and 1 each for the layers of the layer narrative object. And of course, quite importantly, you can preview the production that you've made, and you will be presented the interaction cues, and you will be you will have the ability to interact with the production and test it and debug it as necessary. And I hope the joke is at least partly successful, and I hope Samuel Beckett is not at all turning in his grave at the moment.
Marion, I'm going to jump in there just for a moment. We kept losing your sound as well, and I don't know if that's just at my end or your end. And I know you were sitting there thinking, how long we're going to wait for Godot, but I thought I'd jump in.
So should I can try to, let me try a quick fix.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, I think we're going to be joined here by Alvaro, your colleague Alvaro. So I'm hopeful that Alvaro is in the waiting room ready to join us on stage. And I'm just going to encourage people to post up any questions. I've got a couple of quick questions, but I'll let you finish up and then I'll, if you can, finish up over the next minute or so.
All right. So just to say that we have tested this tool with in making. We saw it in making with a production called What Is Love, made by a production company here, Symbolism Studios.
I hear you at all now, Marion, because you've plugged your earphones in but are failing to talk into the mic. Okay, let's pause there. I'm going to suggest we pause there. Well, Marion's still talking. I hope people appreciate it. I find this music. Apologies to Marion and apologies to anyone else who may be trying to listen to what he's saying.
In Yorkshire and UK, within the XR Stories Creative Industries Partnership.
Marion, I don't know if you can hear me, Marion.
Yes.
If I can stop you there, we lost the last minute. We lost the last minute or so of your presentation.
Oh dear. Oh, I'm very sorry for that.
No, that's okay. So let me just pause. So while you're getting yourself settled, Alvaro, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself and tell us perhaps what role you played in the, or are still playing in the team and in the production?
Sure. Hello, everyone. For the last month, I worked as a graphical user interface manager for Cutting Room. Basically, what I did was to think of the user interaction, color choices, animations, how the user was going to interact with this tool and how to make it as user-friendly as possible. So that was my role within this project. By the way, I cannot hear.
I just realized I was on mute. So how many people are in the team, Marion? We've got a question I'm going to come to in a moment. Just tell us a bit more about the team, how many people in the team, and the sort of skill set that you had and that you were drawing on.
So in making the tool, is the audio better now?
Yeah, that's much clearer, yeah.
In making the tool, we have a software developer, we have 3 researchers, and then we had Alvaro as a consultant on user experience design. So 5 people, but a part of the software was commissioned to a software development company to be built, and we work very closely with the R&D team at the BBC. Again, a very large team there on object-based media.
Okay, we've got a question that's coming from Justin Patterson, which is about filmmakers and about the volume. I mean, I think you made the point very, very early on that the branch system is one which, you know, you end up with thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of different options. And I think the implication there is, you know, are you having to create lots and lots and lots of content for each of those different options? How do you manage that volume?
You have to create more because you have an interactive space. However, there are all sorts of methods to reduce that. Just by changing, by preceding a clip by another one, you could actually change the meaning of the following clip. By overlaying a different music or a different audio, you could change the meaning of the story. So you do not necessarily need to assume that all the content contains audio, video, everything encapsulated. Just disconnect them and you have more flexibility to play with the audio, with text, with graphics. So yes, you do need to produce more, but no, you don't need to produce 100 times more content if you have 100 ways of parsing the story. You're muted again, Graham.
We're used to this by now. Sorry, it's just, you know. Yeah, no, I was going to say in the rehearsal, you showed us a little clip from. Actually, it wasn't from Bandersnatch. It's from another Black Mirror production. So we're all familiar with Black Mirror, but they're a few years ago now. And in my introduction, I talked about how you've been able to adapt and test during COVID. Can you just spend a couple of minutes telling us about what you've been doing over the last few months, and more particularly where this project is going, where you see the applications going over the next few months or the next period, particularly as you know, a whole range of different creatives and production studios come out of lockdown and start to think about how we apply the learning from the last year?
So I saw just another question popped in the chat. Yes, so the production that I showed in the green room was made with the engine of Cutting Room. So it didn't have a front end. So what we've done since then, we put a front end for non-programmers to be able to work with. And we've used it with in two projects with 2 production companies in XR Stories. XR Stories is a creative industries clusters in UK. One in exploring interactive podcasts. There was the company had access to a huge amount of interviews with a key storyteller, with a key person in the music industries of the 70s. And he just flooded and flooded and flooded the mic with lots of stories. And the company thought that they could now just find fragments of stories and build from that an interactive podcast. And we used the tool remotely, and we used the tool to craft and to discover and to create the narrative structures for the podcast.
Okay, well, we're pretty much out of time. So, like Greg Mothersdale, what differentiates this from BBC Storyformer? If you can, quick 20, 30 seconds on that.
Yes, as I said, we work in parallel. So Storyformer is very much rooted in the BBC digital infrastructure. Cutting Room is a standalone tool that you could take anywhere. And Cutting Room provides the ability to have recursive narrative structures folding if you are inner structures into structures. And that's a novelty with regards to everything that's on the market at the moment.
Okay, fantastic. Marion and Alvaro, I'm going to say thank you very much. And I'm going to ask you to step down. Really appreciate that. Fantastic start for this afternoon's Meet the Makers. Next up, we've got... thanks. Next up, we've got Alistair from, I think of it as the Happy Project because it was, and that's HAPPIE for those of you that are in a sing-along mood this afternoon. It doesn't quite work. This is a project that's supported by the Audience the Future programme. And I think of it as the haptic, it's known in our team as the haptics programme. It's all about touch and feel. And I think Alistair's going to tell us more about that now. Alistair, I'll hand over to you.
Brilliant. Hello, everyone. Can I just try sharing my screen here? See if it will play ball. Right. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the time. So, yes, this is the Haptic Project. I was only allowed 4 words in the title, so it became I've Got a Feeling. We're a pretty diverse bunch, so I'm presenting on behalf of quite a lot of really excellent people and a team that probably stretches to more than 20 individual people across 6 different groups. So it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind tour. I'm just going to go really fast and touch on lots of different aspects as we go through. So just to compress the intros, we've got a one-line intro from everyone that I'll just whiz through really quickly. So Generic Robotics, we create hardware and software which brings the digital world close enough to touch, is how I like to describe it. Numerian Software, they build amazing physics engines, and their tagline is making characters more believable, but it's way more than that. Sliced Bread Animation are a really talented London-based animation studio creating innovative, original multi-platform digital content. And UWL, University of West London, are conducting cutting-edge research into record production and audio technologies. The Open University are facilitating digital design for the visually impaired community. And the Science Museum Group are creating exhibitions, iconic objects, and stories of incredible scientific achievement. Or at least that's their tagline. So that's the group. And as I say, a bit of a whirlwind. So I'm probably going to skip over lots of important things, so bear with me. So Haptics 101. Effectively, haptics is the sort of the motivation and the purpose of the whole project. So it's worth touching on just a little bit. So imagine what life would be like without the sense of touch. So that nice, hot, warm, powerful shower will basically be a non-event. You couldn't feel anything. You might even have to turn around to see if it is even turned on. The sense of touch is the first sense to develop in the womb, and it's very often the very last sense that leaves us. And so if you can imagine how much information you can communicate to a loved one in just a momentary touch, and how much you would have to sort of explain and describe that if you're trying to do it in words. And given the last year, it's not too hard to imagine a world where that really simplistic but really important interaction just doesn't exist. Yet in our rapid march into the digital world, we are leaving the sense of touch behind. So coming to the rescue is haptic technology. So haptic technology is the way we bring the sense of touch into the digital world. And because this is my soapbox, I could spend an hour talking about this, but the really, really truncated version is sense of touch is made up of many different elements. You've got skin sensors, hot, cold, so that's temperature. You've got the various different mechanoreceptors that give you sort of textures and vibration. You've then got proprioceptive and kinesthetic, so that's movement and where your limbs are. And then when you bundle all that together, you get a whole load of different ways we interact with the world. The upshot of that is that trying to recreate that experience creates a combinatorial explosion of different kinds of devices and interfaces and softwares and all sorts of different things. So the picture in terms of the technology landscape is just an absolute mess. And so that brings us on to the Happy project. So the Happy project itself is motivated by what I would consider to be one key idea, which is how do we deal with all of these different hurdles and how do we make it accessible? How do we make haptic technologies accessible? So from the point of view of someone approaching this, especially a developer, someone who wants to work with the technology, then they just see a lot of hurdles. So you have to be a programmer. You have to deeply understand the technology. You basically have to pre-select which device you're going to use. So you have to just sort of say, okay, well, we're going to use a glove, or we're going to use this particular kind of vibration thing, or a vest, or a suit, or whatever it might be. And then you have to work out how to get that experience to your end users. How do you deploy it? And so it means anyone wanting to move into this space has to be a little bit of everything, basically, which is really tough, effectively. And so with Happy, we're sort of kind of starting from this one central tenet, which is basically you don't really know what a technology can do, what a new technology can do, until you get it in the hands of the creatives. And so effectively, we see our job as making the tools available so that creative people, the designers, and across a whole range of different disciplines can just use the tools for what they can imagine, rather than needing to be a programmer or an engineer or a hardware developer or whatever it might be. So our goals are to create those tools that designers can use to be creative, and then to bring together a broad range of the different creative industries within this one project, and basically collaborate as a melting pot, a cauldron of different ideas, and see what comes forth from that. And so the structure effectively of our project starts from one base. So the Toya software, which we create at Generic Robotics, is effectively a software middleware, and we're trying to sit between the designers and the hardware, and to make that make the complexity opaque, but make the experience for the user much more transparent. And so you can actually design what you want the user to experience, rather than trying to work out how to make the technology do it. And core part of that is Numerian software, the physics engine, because effectively the sense of touch is how we see the physical world. And our perception of it absolutely sort of is guided by how things move, how objects deform, and everything else. And the physics engine that underlies all of this work is what makes the difference between a sort of an okay world and a believable and intuitive one. And so then on top of that, we have various sort of application strands. So one application strand is led by University of West London, and within that, London College of Music. And so their challenge effectively is that they are developing intuitive haptic interfaces to control really complex audio production workflows. So within audio production, you can have huge numbers of parameters. You only have to sort of conjure up this idea of this huge mixing desk with 500 different knobs and sliders and everything else. And they're using haptic interfaces in combination with neural networks to be able to make small numbers of interactions scale up to control really large numbers of parameter sets. And I think that's really exciting, because effectively that's doesn't just stop at music. That could be just about any kind of production, media production, multimedia, multi-dimensional media production you can think of. And so this is it in action, if you like, without a video. So that's Andy, one of the researchers there. So he's got a mixed reality headset on. If you add on the haptic hardware and the recreation of this sort of kind of complex multi-dimensional controller they've created virtually. You fuse that all together, you get this really intuitive way to control many dimensions at once. So next on our little journey of applications is the Open University. So they are facilitating digital design pathways for visually impaired users. So if you imagine what the online world is like effectively, or the digital world is like if you can't see, it becomes a really stark place. Most of what we do digitally is visually driven or audibly driven. And so what they're looking at is how do you effectively enable artists, designers to draw and feel what they're creating? How can you feel what you've drawn? How can you sketch and experience that as you would if you were sort of building something physically? So that's really, really exciting project, and they've got amazing results coming out of that. The third application strand is being led by Slicebread Animation, and they're using haptics in a similar way to UWL. They're using haptics to try and make the creation of experiences a much more sort of fluid and intuitive approach. So they're creating tools so that you can use haptics to help you help them design immersive marketing experiences effectively. And so they're able to cover complete workflow all the way from populating a scene with animation, saving and loading, all via the haptic gloves that they're using. Finally, the last application strand is with the Science Museum. And so the core of the Science Museum really are hands-on experiences, fully immersive experiences. And they're always looking for richer, more dynamic ways to engage audiences. But post-COVID, that whole thing has really become forefront. And so they're working with us to create haptic touch experiences using contactless devices, so they can create interactive experiences which you never even have to physically come into contact with. And so my last parting thoughts, basically, sense of touch is really important. Working with haptic technology is really quite painful. It shouldn't be. The potential applications, of which we've touched on really just a few, are absolutely boundless. And really things get interesting when the creative types are free to do their thing and not constrained by the complexities and the rigors of sort of new technologies and complicated technologies and things that sort of don't quite work together and everything else. So I think that's 10 minutes. So I will.
That is perfect. Alistair, thank you very, very much indeed. That was excellent. That was perfectly timed. I think you're going to be joined by Justin to respond to any questions. We haven't had any questions yet in the chat box, but while people are thinking of questions or typing up their questions, I wonder if you can, I'm just going to, really struck by a couple of things you said, which I thought was worth playing back and getting your thoughts on. I mean, one was this point that you made about you don't know what a technology can do until you give it to creators. And the point about the creators is that they work out, you've got to work out first what the users want to do, rather than, as it were, what the technology is designed to do. So first question I thought would be worth perhaps you reflecting on is, can you give us an example of that in the applications you referred to, where maybe the user said, okay, that technology doesn't work for me. I want to do it differently, or change the feel, the interaction. Is there an example you could refer to?
Well, Justin might want to take that one, actually. I mean, effectively what you're talking about there, if I understand correctly, is effectively the difference between what we understand as technology developers and what we think the world needs, and then what we learn and understand as soon as we start working with creative designers. So effectively, you could almost sum that up by what we've learnt in doing the project itself, because that was sort of the point in it. We had a technology stack which works fairly well, and from that we start working with people like Justin, and we learn, okay, well, they need to do this, they need to do that, or the way we thought someone could just go away and create this thing just doesn't make sense from the point of view of someone in a different discipline. And so we have to then go back and create a tool or some way for it to be put into practice. So Justin, I mean, what do you think that was or is probably still, but are the biggest missing parts there?
The biggest missing parts. That's a more complex answer than I was question I was about to respond to. Let me be like a politician and backtrack to my what I thought of saying in answer directly to Graham's question. One of the things that we started off doing was Ali provided us with a device called a Movint Falcon. Now this is sort of like a three-dimensional mouse whereby you can grab a little knob and move it in 3 dimensions and feel haptic resistance depending on what you do. And we were very excited about this first of all, but we realized after a while what it was doing was only giving us a single point of contact with 1 dimension beyond what a mouse could do, which is of course just X, Y. It doesn't have the Z, the height thing. So Ali came back to us with a pair of devices called Geomagic Falcons, which are kind of like pantograph-shaped servo-controlled arms with thimbles that fit in the fingers. And at that point, we had force feedback available to 2 fingers. And as soon as you're that, you're then able to start doing grasping movements and the sort of multi-touch type gestures we're familiar with from touchscreens, but in 3 dimensions. And that's where the haptic thing for us really came to life. The single point of contact in the Falcon wasn't quite doing it, but as soon as you got multiple points of contact in 3 dimensions with force feedback, the possibilities just explode. And it was at that point that we realized that we could start extending this level of control with neural networks and do things that weren't directly related to the haptic force technology.
Okay, so let me just jump in on that. So we're running out of time, but a couple of, I mean, you generate a lot of questions. No. Question was, with unlimited funds, what would you do? So don't necessarily answer, but where might you, with more funds at least, where are the new applications?
That's easy. We very recently asked Innovate for some more funds to do something exciting, and they said no. So I will tell you what we wanted to do. So basically, our idea is fundamentally the next step is the cloud. So we want to create fully interactive collaboration. So you can do great collaboration online at the moment, but there is no touch, which means you've just cut off a huge swathe of what otherwise happens in real life because it's not there. And we identified 3 key strands for that. And we wanted to create a general purpose online space where anyone with a haptic device could plug in and be part of a creative, collaborative physical environment. So that's what we wanted to do. And that would have been, that would be our next step, as it were.
Okay, well, I'm going to cut you. Well, yes or no answer to this one. Do you know of projects involving haptics for music? And if so, I'd suggest, could you, as soon as we're finished, because I'm going to have to move us on, I'm afraid, could you respond to Alvaro's question in the chat box, one of the 2 of you, Justin or Alistair, please?
I'll pick that up, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Listen, we're out of time. It's really fascinating. Miriam's already posted in the chat box where if you look on the Audience the Future Live website, you'll find more information out about Happy and about, I think, all of the projects being showcased today. So Justin and Alistair, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to leave the stage, or Miriam will kick you out, one or the other. Thank you. I'm now going to move to Denise. Now, I think I misintroduced Denise when I introduced her at the beginning. Denise is from SPATIALx and is going to be presenting the project that she's going to be talking about is IMMORTAL XR. And I'm hoping that when Denise joins me now on stage, she will nod and say that's correct, or shake her head profusely if somehow I've still got it wrong.
That is correct, Graham.
Okay, Denise, brilliant. I'm going to hand over to you with your wonderful, I think, Media City backdrop, and you're going to tell us about your project, and I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. So, yes, my name is Denise White. I'm the founder and CEO of 2 XR-related companies. One is SPATIALx, which was set up in 2017, and the other is Blank XR, which was set up last year in May of 2020. Before moving into the extended reality realm, I worked at the Walt Disney Company for 6.5 wonderful years as the director of direct-to-consumer technologies. And so it's really at Disney where I had my first taste of XR. We did some stuff with ILMX Labs and setting up different trials for people to demo things like the trials of Tatooine. And so, there's just really, I knew from that first instance that this is something that is going to change the future. It's going to change the world. So let me, and I want to be a part of it. So let me share my screen with you all. Okay. So we set up SPATIALx, as I said, in 2017. And in thinking about different applications, first of all, we spent the first couple of years doing a lot of R&D and traveling the world and speaking at many different exciting conferences. We've spoken at Augmented World Expo on the future of retail as holographic. We've done Beyond 2020. You know, it's just been an incredible journey. So we've been focusing on R&D. We've been building our team. We have the wonderful Mike Powell, who leads the Microsoft Development Garage in New York City. He's on our advisory board. We have team members in New York City, here in Manchester, of course, and then also in Eindhoven in the Netherlands and in Saudi Arabia. So we're quite a globally distributed team, which brings a lot of different perspectives and dimensions. And we're working together on a 10-year roadmap. We like to look at it as a vision of 2030. So we spend a lot of time looking at the audience of the future, of course, and what are the aspects that are going to really shape the way that people are consuming technology and interacting with it. So obviously, as we're in the field of spatial ambient computing, for us, you know, we have our feet firmly planted in the mixed reality arena. And, you know, once you kind of get past the cool kid conference circuit and kind of going, yeah, what we're doing is really cool, you have to find a purpose for it, you have to find a meaning, and you have to respond to real problems. So we're trying to really work on using these types of technologies in the kind of XR spectrum to align it with real needs. And so we have to respond to, of course, our continuously transforming reality around us. And as with everyone, obviously, COVID hit us last year, and it changed a little bit of our focus. You know, we had originally set our focus on retail, but really the reality for us is there are three vertical areas that we're tackling on our 10-year roadmap. So it's the verticals of entertainment, commerce, and communication. And another thing that's really important for us is that we have an alignment with sustainability. And I think that, you know, this experience that we've all lived through over the past year has really highlighted the need to make sure that wherever we go from here, we have a sustainable reality. So, you know, everything that we're doing as much as possible, we are bringing in line with the United Nations SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. So with that said, the exciting headline for us is that Blank XR was birthed last year. It is our platform, it's our baby, and, you know, it's Earth's first mega mall in XR. And what we're doing here is we're transforming entertainment and social and retail. And part of the reason why we're calling it a mega mall is because that's exactly what the traditional mall is, right? You know, you normally, if you go to one of the stores over here, a big one's called Westfield over here, you know, you are able to experience those three things. You're doing it, though, in a physical space where you have to go in and physically shop in a retail store, or you can go into the cinema. And so that's why, you know, as you can see, the actual definition of what a traditional mega mall is it's a mega mall is a very large shopping area containing very many shops, cinemas, and restaurants, right? So what we're doing is we're taking immersive technologies and we're actually transforming and rethinking what that experience would be like. And we're doing that across the spectrum, as mentioned, with mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality applications. And in the future, of course, this is a 10-year vision. So in the future, another thing that we're very interested in doing is then integrating these technologies in the platform that we're already building into a physical space, into a physical environment, because we believe that it'll create just a new dimension. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You know, we started off in retail, as I mentioned, with a store concept called Blank XR. So you can imagine, you know, you're going into a blank environment and it's replicated across the world. So, you know, the environment maps are the same across multiple different locations. And, you know, it really opens that potential to have a retail experience, an entertainment experience, but yet there you are in a blank room, because of course the experience is being projected to you holographically. So it's a big vision. You know, we've talked to thousands of different people about it, and we have a lot of feedback through the research that we've conducted. And I think one of the places that we're starting is with entertainment, because it fills a real need in the here and now. And so we actually have put together a deep voice engine, and this is IMMORTAL XR. It's the
Denise, I'm just going to jump in because we can't see your slides moving. I've only just realized that you've been clicking through and...
Oh, thank you for saying that to me,
Okay.
because I'm here just kind of presenting away. What can you see? Do you see Immortal XR?
Yeah, we can see Immortal. We can see now Immortal, deep voice engine, input, audio,
Okay.
artist, etc.
Okay, that's what you should see. So hopefully, I'm okay. I know we're clock's ticking, so I'm just going to keep moving on. So that's, as long as you can see that now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo in just a second.
Yeah.
So this is Immortal XR. It's our deep voice engine, which is a part of our platform that we're building. You know, part of the vision that we have is to create what we refer to as synthetic media formats. Okay, so what that means is that we're able to have a holographic capture from a light field capture or even volumetric capture, and then we're powered artificial intelligence deep voice engine. We're using a host of services from Microsoft Azure, you know, including language understanding with Lewis, and obviously machine learning and cognitive services. And what that enables us to do in creating an experience for Immortal XR is we're actually turning superstars, or we're turning artists and influencers into holographic superstars in XR. So in this demo, we've got a clip here from Grimes, where we actually we created a web scraper to go and kind of look at all of the different social media platforms that the artist is on. So in this case, you know, we can see the artist's tweets, and you can hear, this is gonna, I'm gonna play for you a natural, the way that Grimes's voice naturally sounds. She speaks at 100 miles an hour. So hopefully you can hear this.
Possibly need to go insane will probably lead to something good. I was like really into Hildegard von Bingen at the time.
So that's Grimes naturally. And then what we've done is we've built a synthetic voice engine, and with about 60 passes, you can hear what that sounds like on the output.
I was having a baby this week, so I literally didn't realize my Italian Vogue cover came out. Simulation feels like it's at level 10 at the moment, might be offline for a bit as of today. But this is an honor of the highest order, thanks so much at Vogue Italia.
So as you can see, it's pretty close. We're getting there. We're getting there. And so that last bit is an output from our synthetic voice engine, as I mentioned. And so what we're working on is then combining that with a hologram, so that you're essentially, when you put on your mixed reality headset, like the Microsoft HoloLens device, for example, you'll be able to actually interact with your favorite artist in a very natural way. You'll be able to have a conversation with them and demo live performances in a very natural way. So that's a part of the vision. I'm really happy to have had the time to share with you. I know we're coming right up at 10 minutes, Graham. I'd like to close out with just saying that on the 1st of April, we're launching a new podcast series called The United States of Reality. So if you're interested, please find us on LinkedIn. We will be making an announcement nearer the time, but there's a lot of different exciting things that we're working on right now, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. So thank you very much for the time.
Denise, thank you very, very much. I hope we got there in the end with your slide deck. There aren't any questions in the chat. I'm going to wait. I'll ask you one small thing, actually. I'm just really intrigued that the previous presentation was about haptics. Yours is very much about that synthetic voice engine.
Yes.
Interestingly, the voice was much, much clearer, although not much slower, I have to say. It was still super fast. I mean, where are you going with the product? What's the next iteration or the plan for the build out of the project of the
Absolutely. So the plan for the product is toward the end of calendar year 2021. So by the end of this year, we're going to have a release on the Microsoft Store. So we're building an application experience for the HoloLens in the first instance. So you'll be able to have an experience in sort of interacting with a few of the artists who will be coming out later on this year.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much, Denise.
Thank you very much.
We've got 10 or 12 minutes left. I'm going to move on to Yasmin now, who's going to be joining us to talk about Plan V, which is a VR production tool based out of and supported by Cluster, which is the cluster that's based in South Wales, part of the Clusters program. Yasmin, 10 minutes, and then I'll jump in and start to wind up the session. Thank you.
I'm always short on time, so that adds an additional level of stress. But hi everyone, I'm Yasmin. I am a producer at Painting Practice. We like to define ourselves as a sort of digital art department because we realize that in the film and TV industry there's a lot of different departments which should be collaborating, and oftentimes there's some just little cracks in the middle where a lot of work falls through when we could perhaps have a more sort of united approach. So we do that type of work in between art department, VFX, the script department, production, and we tackle different type of work, whether it be from production design, to concept art, to pre-visualization, 3D work, post-visualization, and so forth. And while doing our work, I'm just going to screen share here a second. Here we go. While doing our work, we started little by little getting into virtual production. Initially, it was actually accidental. So we didn't mean to, but it just happened because of restriction budgets. So in the film and TV world, budget restrictions are one of the main things that will affect the way a film or series is shot or tackled, what type of visual effects are we going to be able to afford, what type of design, characters, costumes, and so forth. So when we started looking into virtual reality, we had it was on Black Mirror. Dan May, the art director, and Joel Collins, the production designer, both owners of Painting Practice, started looking into it, working on Black Mirror. And this is one of the examples, for example, apologies for the reiteration, but this is one of the episodes of when we accidentally used some sort of virtual production into the series. So I'm not going to show the entirety of the video because of time constraints, but you can notice that pretty much the entire episode was shot with screens around the characters, and then we would have images sort of rolling out on these screens, just because there was no budget for the episode and we had to find a way to deliver the story, which we thought was amazing. So this was one of our first official doubling with virtual production and in our work. And that's how the idea of Plan V came to us while working on His Dark Materials season 1 in Wales. We actually had different prototypes of what the eventual physical tool would look like. And thanks to the cluster actually in Cardiff, we were able to get some funding and make this happen. So I know that how normally when there's a problem, there's going to be tools created to solve directly that problem, but we actually took a more large view of how we could make the film and TV industry move forward faster thanks to technologies, and help all the different departments collaborate, offering better quality and product services, but also supporting production in budget costs and so forth. So Plan V is a sort of pre-visualization tool where you can put inside it all of your sets and animations and pre-visualization, and you can just, it's sort of having a set in your computer pretty much, if I want to put it in simpler terms, where you can choose cameras, decide how you're going to shoot a scene, you can have the sort of 3D models of the actors running around, and you can decide how the set is going to look like and move forward with it and so forth. At the start, it used to be a very big camera, and then eventually we kept progressing until getting it in a simple sort of iPad version that you can just move around and as if you were moving into a real set. We also have a VR version with the headset, but we realized that people would sometimes get motion sick, hence us also developing a sort of platform where you could use it that is not in a headset version. So yes, just going to be it's fake blood, it's not real blood, but this is how we used it, for example, on season 1 of His Dark Materials. So all of this set is virtual. We created it into the app, and then thanks to the app, we can just walk around and look at what the set will look like before building it, which ensures that we're fully aware of not only what it's going to look like, but also how much it's going to cost and so forth. So we can all just have all these different agreements with the departments before we get to go ahead to go and construct the set and film there. Another usage of it was in the Cholson, also season 1 of His Dark Materials, where we had an empty quarry and we sort of had to visualize what we had to make this a village, a town. So how would we make it possible for us to visualize that easily, not only for us, but also for the construction team, for everyone to just already imagine what this town would look like, although initially it's just an empty quarry. So we built it onto our app, and thanks to the app, we could be able to fly as if we were a drone and look at the town in its entirety. And the construction team, for example, found it really helpful to have this sort of tool to be able to look at exactly where the different buildings were supposed to go and so forth. So the pros of virtual production are, of course, the ease of use. It's an affordable virtual camera rig, although it really depends from what you're looking to do. It can be affordable and help you save money, as it can be really expensive if you want to get into more specific type of cameras and more set tools. But also we wanted it to be a tool that helps democratize the use of virtual reality and virtual production, hence us putting the tool for free on the internet for people to download and use. And then we created another version called Plan V Tools that is on the Unreal Engine marketplace, which costs very little money. So the idea was to really help people access this type of new technologies, take them, learn how to use them, and be able to bring these new solutions in these areas. And I know I talk a lot about film and TV, but it's not just for film and TV. It can be used in architecture, in engineering, in all of those different areas that actually needs you to see what you're sort of thinking of doing before doing it. Obviously, there's some bad sides to it, but I realized that my time is over, but I'm really happy to talk about all of this in the booth later if you have any questions.
Yes, Mia, that's great. Thanks. I tell you what I'm going to ask you to do is, could you go back a couple of slides? You raced very quickly over the prototyping.
Yes.
And I thought if you could just spend a moment talking us through the different stages in the development of the prototype, and including also the game engine technologies that you're using behind that to develop I just think it'd be really good to spend a couple of moments on that.
Sure. So when we started, once again, it was this, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it was the first initial VR camera.
We can.
Was it was us pretty much taking a headset, as you can buy them, and breaking it apart and inserting the different parts on a long stick so that you can move it around and sort of film as if you were in a set that obviously doesn't exist, but the machine thinks that there is a set around you. We realized that we could do it in a much more easier practical ways, it was very heavy to carry. It required space around you if you don't want to just occasionally hit someone that sat working on their computer. So we then switched to a sort of camera prototype, also based on the headset. So it had the headset. We sort of used the tools that already were existing in the headset and added a screen behind it, and you could just pretty much move the headset around and do that same thing. And then eventually it just became an app that you can download, and you can download all the files, put them in there, and you can see it. Either it's on your computer or, and I mean, on your computer, you can't walk around with it, obviously, but you can do it with your mouse and keyboard. Or if you want to walk around with it, you can just use a tablet and walk in the room, and it will give you that impression that around you is this set that's built that doesn't really exist. But on the tablet, if you move it around, you will see the set.
That's great. It was just, I mean, I think it was just a brilliant example for me of a DIY process, and actually what, from our point of view, in terms of how's the funding being developed, it's some of it is really, it's very, very intuitive. It's about making and developing prototypes and experiences that adapt, as it were, in the lab. I mean, I just find it fascinating that people, you know, there's always this assumption that what we do isn't a lab. It's a laboratory process that you've described there, where you're taking a product, you're testing it, adapting it, testing it, adapting it, until you're at the point where actually you can make something that can be, you know, available for users in the environment you said, with all of the pros and cons. There haven't been any other questions that have come up. There's been a comment that's made by Katie Taylor that she wants Yasmin, you to get together with Denise and Alistair and Marion and create some sort of multifaceted, wonderful device. I think Black Mirror is a constant throughout there. Perhaps there'll be Black Mirror at South by Southwest in 2022 with all the participants involved here.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting show, and it brings out so much about technology and so forth that I think it really pushes people to have a different optic about how we engage with all the different things we do in our work. So.
Well, so Greg has just asked what I was going to say. So what are you going to do next? What's the next application or iteration of the... I mean, you've shown us examples from his dark materials, but in terms of the product development, how would you be adapting it and developing it to make it even better?
Well, we actually are requesting for new funds moving ahead now, and we have an entire plan laid out. We want to create this sort of, because we had the initial plan V, and then we had plan V tools, and then we sort of want to widen it now in a plan V suite family that will include much more specific tools, because this one is pretty generic and it's made for people who are perhaps not so tech savvy or so tech interested to use as a first form of engagement. But now we want to make tools that are really much more specific to the different departments and things that you need to do to make a film happen. It will be cameras, specific cameras, tools for lighting, rigging, and so forth. So definitely there's a lot of work ahead, but it's exciting.
Okay, Yasmin, fantastic. Thank you. Look, well, I think we should leave it there. I'm going to say thank you to Yasmin, Denise, Alistair, and Marion. Fantastic presentations and some extraordinary innovation that's been being undertaken over the last year. I think it's really sad that we can't see each other and, in Alistair's case, at least touch each other. But I'm looking forward to when we can do that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in Austin this time next year. Please be there. I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you again to all of our panelists and makers today. Really appreciate your time and efforts. And look forward to seeing you at the next UK House session. Thank you.
I don't think I'll ever forget my first day at Factory 42. News of a possible national lockdown because of COVID had just broken.
We had actually launched a new experience in the Metro Centre in Gateshead.
Had moved into full production and ready for a performance in June 2020.
We had created and established an amazing story with Aardman. All our technology was in place. 2020 seemed to hold so much promise, yet all across the creative sector, the impacts of the pandemic were felt. And this is a story of some of the projects that were supported by the audience of the Futures Challenge and the Creative Industries Clusters program, and how even the best laid plans were disrupted.